In, let it out. Close your eyes if you feel you can do that. And just kind of relax. Just kind of turn yourself within. As I turn within, I retreat from outer awareness and enter my soul, the divine in me. It is here that I know my connection to Spirit. Deep within, I find the peace that passes understanding. Deep within, I find the knowledge of all things and the awareness of absolute good. Deep within, I touch the gifts that are God. It is here that I receive wisdom and guidance. It is here that I know truth and understanding, and where I am strengthened and comforted. This is the divine essence that I am. The core of me is God. And from the God within me, I can do anything. The core of me is God. And from the God within me, I can do anything. Let's keep that in mind as we go into the silence. The silence where we actually commune with ourselves as God. Into the silence. ever so slowly begin to bring your consciousness back to this place. It's comforting to stay there, but we need to bring our consciousness back to this place. Start to wiggle your fingers and toes and feel your body again. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes, maybe stretch a little, and become fully aware of the here and now. Because if you're not in the here and now, you're not going to hear what I have to say. Morning again. I am Bill Warner, for those who are not familiar with me. And I'm here to talk about the 5 principles. Well, not all of them, really. Last week, as you recall, Melissa gave a magnificent talk on principle number 1. I remind you of that only because some of us are of an age that needs a little prodding to remember. So, principle 1, well, I got to tell you, when I first came to Unity, and it was almost 6 years ago now, I walked into the building and these banners were hanging on the wall. And I stood there before I took my seat and I said, well, let me see what this says. And I look, okay, principle 1. Yeah, okay, I stopped believing in the old man in the golden chair, judging everybody a long time ago, so that's okay. Principle number 2, the only thing I ever read there was inherently good. Yes. You know, traditional Christianity has you inherently bad, needing saving. Inherently good, I could live with that. Never really felt broken. Principle 3, creating our own reality. I never really gave that any thought at all before coming here. Principle 4, prayer and meditation. I really didn't like prayer, avoided it when I could, and I'd never meditated. And principle 5, living the truth you know, I always thought I was doing that, you know, I was trying to treat people the way I wanted to be treated, and living by the rules, I was doing okay, I felt pretty good about it. And then I came here. And I started on my journey of learning what all these really mean. And that's when I decided that principle number 2, that's the most important one. That's the key. Because without principle number 2, you can't really dig into the real meat of all the other principles. You got to have that. If I could have my first slide, Chris. These are the titles in the chapters, for the chapters in the book that we're doing, the 5 principles. Okay? Principle 1, all God is all. Principle 2, you are God. Principle 3, co-creating with God. Principle 4, communication with God. Principle 5, expressing God. Now, coming from the traditional Christian background that I did, principle 2 was a bit of a hurdle. Because it was, blasphemy, it was heresy. You to think that you are God. No. But really, when you think about it, if you're not God, then you're co-creating with a God that is outside of yourself. You're co-creating with not you. If you're in communion with God, prayer and meditation, then you're in communion with something outside of yourself. And if you're expressing God and not expressing you, then you're expressing something outside of yourself, and you might as well have stayed in that traditional Christianity, because that's what they believe. But what happens if you do believe you're God? Let's try a little algebraic substitution. Next slide, please. Now we see you equals God. So let's put you everywhere we had the word God. So, except for God is all. Principle 3, you're co-creating with you, the God presence in you. You're in communion with you, the God presence in you. You now are expressing you as the God presence in you. You equals God. You okay with that one? Well, if you're not, and I had a hard time getting into there's another thing that helped me along the way, and that was this fact that God is all. Well, if God is all, but you're not God, then you're outside of all. How arrogant is that? There's another way to look at it that we use in Unity a lot. And that is this metaphor of the wave in the ocean. Okay? The water that makes up the wave, is it any different than the water that's in the rest of the ocean? No. But what is the wave? The wave is nothing more, and the surface of the water is nothing more than that part of the water that is interacting with the environment, with the air, with the land. Okay? So we could look at it as that's our humanity, our human part, interacting with the environment. So if the water's not any different, then we're God. One last thing. When we say we're God, we're not all of God. We're not the whole of God. But we're made up of the same energy, the same attributes, the same composition. We're nothing more or nothing less than God. Eric Butterworth wrote a book called In the Flow of Life, and we did a presentation on it a couple of years ago. And in it, he says this. He says, "In the moment, I appreciate the beauty of a sunset. In another part of the world, the first rays of a rising sun are lighting the morning sky. The sun never stops shining, nor does the light that God is." He goes on to say, God is the light. You are in it. It is you. It is the reality of you. God does not have light. God is light. Each of us is light. Not visible light, but the light of understanding. Principle 2 is about understanding who we are. And we're all here at Unity. Why? Why'd you come to Unity? You could have gone anywhere. Every time we start a service, and Melissa did it this morning, she says, God and unity, leave no one out. Did you come here for acceptance? We also say that we celebrate our oneness with each other, with the universe. Did you come here to be part of something bigger than yourself? We also say that we try to inspire and empower personal transformation. Well, we're not a spa or a beauty parlor, so I can assume it's not physical transformation you're looking for. so that it must be spiritual transformation. But we're a spirit. We're spirituals. This is just a human experience. So if we're spirit having a human experience, what's the transformation you're looking for? What's the point of the human experience if you're a spirit? Well, Reverend Debenport, in her book, says the point of the human experience is spiritual growth. And the point of spiritual growth is to know yourself as spirit and to express that in your day-to-day life. This isn't a complicated principle. It's pretty straightforward. There's another book that I highly recommend, The Power Within You, again by Eric Butterworth. And in this book, he says, Jesus, our way shower, stressed, I'll get it out. I need some more Wonder Water. Jesus, our way shower, stressed a spiritual philosophy that is you-centered. Not church, not theology. You. But to reach Jesus' ideal, we can't simply believe things about him. We have to come to believe that what Jesus believed about himself, we believe about ourselves. But you know, when I look at principle 2, I don't see something to believe. I see something to do. I see our need to grow spiritually. But we have an obstacle in our way, do we not? Our human nature. Can I get the next slide, please? In the book, Reverend Debenport lists the 4 essential parts of a human: body, ego, soul, spirit. A body. Nothing more than a spacesuit, really, so that we can function in this environment. The ego, that's our mind. And when it's healthy, it helps us to focus. It helps us to function in this environment. Our soul is an eternal, individualized creation that only wants to grow, learn, and be closer to spirit. And what is spirit? Spirit is our life force, present in everything, everyone. It's everywhere. It's what we now call God. She goes on to say that we do not have a soul, we are a soul. We've come here, taken this body form in order to learn, to grow. She even talks about a group of souls on the other side getting together and saying, okay, I'm getting ready to go over and I need to learn some patience. So you got another soul that says, okay, I'll go with you. I'll be your teenage son. But the other thing about the ego is that it's there to protect us. help us survive this environment. And as a consequence, something has happened that I've been talking about for quite often, ever since I come up here. I think I've mentioned it. And that is the fact that our heart can't go where our head won't lead. Our heart being where we keep our love and our compassion and our sympathy, empathy, our Christ spirit, if you will. That can't manifest into the body, into the world, unless the ego mind says, yeah, that's what I want to do. I'm going to get up early Saturday morning and I'm going to go to that community breakfast. I'm not going to stay in bed and just sleep and hope everything went well and hope they had enough people to do it, and So the heart cannot go where the head will not lead. But that's not our fault. It's not our fault because we're humans. And we're at the mercy of our current level of evolution. Now, they say our universe has been in existence for 14 billion years. If we were to represent that 14 billion years as 100 Earth years, then the Earth would actually have only been in existence for a third of the time, 33 years. And how long have Homo sapiens, how long has man been on this planet? 1 day. Is it any wonder that we have not evolved to the point where our soul and our mind can integrate sufficiently to allow us to manifest more from our heart? We simply haven't caught up to modern times. It doesn't take a genius to look at what's happening today and say, technologically, we're not ready for this. We're not ready for all that freedom that the internet provides. Too many voices pulling in too many directions. Too much distractions in the human form. And our ego mind, like I said, is there to protect us. The ego mind is concerned with 3 things: food, sex, and safety, and not necessarily in that order. Our fight or flight response is still very strong. And even though we're not running away from lions and tigers and bears, we're still experiencing a lot of stress in our day from this ego that is trying to make us either fight or flight. But we do have a prefrontal cortex in our brain. It's right here, right behind the forehead. And that's for logical and analytical thinking. So maybe we can think our way out of this. That cortex considers alternatives, understands consequences, thinks through decisions, envisions our futures. It's the seat of our self-awareness. And the mystics say that's where our third eye of intuition is. Unfortunately, there are times when our animal instincts, the ego mind, overtake us before our human logic or spiritual intuition can kick in. Perhaps that's one reason why there's so much evil in the world. Jesus, our way shower, gave us an example of how we can live from our higher self. He taught us how to override our primitive instincts. He just says, focus on consciousness, not behavior. He was explaining this to the Pharisees one day as they were trying to get him to make himself guilty. And he gave him an example. He said, anger is just as bad as murder, and lust is just as bad as adultery. And they looked at him and they said, what? He says, yeah. Anger doesn't have to end in murder, but it's ready to. Lust doesn't have to end in adultery, but it's ready to. The only thing that determines our actions are our thoughts, beliefs, and feelings, are our consciousness. Are we going to consciously accept this anger and murder? Yes or no? Are we going to consciously accept this lust and commit adultery? Yes or no? I mean, these are ethical questions. And it determines what kind of person you are. Now, for us to evolve to our higher self, and we do have to evolve to it, we're going to need to adapt our egos so that they look at things a little differently. We're going to have to evolve our ego, our mind, to not be so quick to jump into the animal instincts of fight or flight, but rather look elsewhere. In other words, we have to adapt our ego so we express more from our soul, from our spirit, from our heart, rather than from that primitive human brain that we have. And this may mean giving up some attachments to the dramas of human experience that trigger us into action in the first place. Now, what could be some of those things? Reverend Debenport explains it oh so well with one sentence. She says, pretty much any event that could make up the lyrics of a country song is an expression of ego. Pretty much any event that could make up the lyrics of a country song is pretty much ego. So instead of the heart can't go where the head won't lead, we need to start working on ourselves so that we have a heart that leads and the head follows. And we can do this. You can do it. Humans are the first species to understand that we actually have the capacity to change. We can evolve consciously. We can choose to be who we want to be as individuals. So let's think about that. To be who you want to be, you have to know who you are first, do you not? Next slide, please, Chris. So here's some questions for you to ponder. Originally, I was going to ask somebody to come up and ask them the questions to see what kind of answers I got, but I figured no, and I don't have the time for that. So anyway, questions to ponder. Who are you? If I were to bring you up and say, okay, introduce yourself, who are you? What would you say? Would you say, well, I'm a 70-something male, married, 2 kids, 7 grandkids, 2 great-grandkids, currently retired. Those are all roles. They're not who you are. Those are roles you've played. What is your personality like? Are you cordial on Sundays? And it's none of your business what I do the rest of the week? What kind of personality are you? What is your Christ spirit like? Let's see. My Christ spirit is like, it's like a Dairy Queen soft serve vanilla cone dipped in butterscotch that is, the hardened shell is starting to crack and the ice cream is dripping out and melting all over my hand and dripping down all over. My Christ spirit is a mess. So those are some questions to ponder. And since I always like leaving you with one more question, Chris, which one of those other three was the hardest to answer? Remember, nothing is more important than to realize that we are truly individualized expressions of God. That's what unity principle number 2 is saying. Our true nature is divine. Thank you for your kind attention this morning. And I bid you namaste. You're welcome.
Great job. Well done. All right, I think we have enough people to, let's try circling the tables today as we bring our service to a close. And don't forget, after we sing our peace song and our prayer for protection, there's cupcakes in the kitchen. I want to get in here. Okay. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let